In Revenge of the Sith, we saw Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi face each other for the last time as brothers.
My allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy!
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I will do what I must.
You will try.
A duel born from betrayal raged across the fire world of Mustafar, ending with Anakin defeated, broken, and left to burn. That moment shattered what was left of their bond, secured the fall of the Jedi, and sealed Anakin's fate as Darth Vader. But what if it didn't end that way? What if, in that final leap, Anakin was faster? What if he struck down his master instead of the other way around? In this version of the story, that's exactly what happens. And nothing turns out the same. Let's begin. The air on Mustafar shimmered with heat. Ash clung to the sky, and molten rivers roared beneath narrow platforms as two figures moved in a blur of blue light. For what felt like hours, Anakin and Obi-Wan had fought without pause. Every strike, every parry, born of years spent learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. This wasn't a sparring match between Master and Apprentice anymore. It was a war of survival. They clashed along the banks, boots sliding on black sand. The lava's glow lit their faces in shades of fire and shadow. Obi-Wan's breathing was steady, measured, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. Anakin's, by contrast, burned with a mix of certainty and rage. The fight carried them toward a jagged slope. Obi-Wan made his move, leaping onto higher ground. His blade was ready, angled down at his former apprentice. "Don't try it," he warned, voice sharp but pleading. To Obi-Wan, it was a final chance to stop this without ending him. To Anakin, it was just another limit being placed on him, the same voice that had told him to wait, to hold back, to trust in orders he no longer believed in. He was done listening. He jumped. Not the desperate, reckless leap of the history we know, but a calculated strike. In mid-air, his body twisted, his saber arcing low. Obi-Wan swung, expecting the same misstep that had once saved his life, but his blade found nothing. Anakin's cut landed clean, burning through cloth and flesh in a single, final stroke. Obi-Wan gasped, his saber slipping from his fingers. His knees buckled, and he fell to the ground. The man who had trained him, fought beside him, and called him brother was gone before his body even stilled. For a long moment, Anakin stood over him, chest heaving, the roar of the lava the only sound. He had done it. The last obstacle between him and the future he imagined was gone. But the silence didn't last. A sharp, breaking gasp carried across the platform. Padme. She stood at the ramp of her ship, one hand over her mouth, the other wrapped protectively over her stomach. She had woken just in time to see what he had done. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "You killed him." Anakin stepped toward her, trying to steady his voice. "He was going to kill me. He stood in the way of everything we've built." "This," she said, her voice trembling, "this is not what we were meant to be." "I did this for you," Anakin said, louder now, desperate to make her understand. "For us, for our child." Her head shook slowly, her voice breaking. "I don't even know you anymore." Something inside him splintered. Anger rose with fear, and the Force responded before his mind caught up. His hand lifted, and an invisible grip closed around her throat. Padme, as breath caught, her feet leaving the ground. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, hers full of hurt, his lit with something darker than rage. Then she went limp. He caught her before she hit the deck, lowering her carefully. She was still alive, but her breathing was shallow. Anakin's chest rose and fell with sharp, uneven breaths. His mind was spinning, but there was no time to think. A shadow fell over the platform. The Chancellor's shuttle descended, black and sleek against the glowing sky. The ramp lowered with a hiss. Palpatine stepped out, his face calm, his voice curling like smoke. "Lord Vader, you have done well." Anakin's jaw tightened. She wasn't supposed to see this. "She will learn to understand," Palpatine replied, stepping closer. His gaze drifted to Obi-Wan's lifeless body, then to Padme, lying still. You have ended the last of the Jedi. The galaxy is ready for the peace we will build. Bring her. She must live." Anakin hesitated, but only for a moment. He gathered her into his arms and carried her up the ramp. Inside, the cold white light of the shuttle fell over them both. Outside, the black sand swallowed the glow of Obi-Wan's fallen saber, and with it, the final breath of the Jedi Order. The shuttle cut through the haze of Mustafar's sky, leaving the planet's firestorms behind. Anakin sat beside Padme in the medbay, the hum of the engines filling the silence between them. She hadn't woken since collapsing on the platform. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her face pale under the harsh light. He kept his eyes fixed on her, the memory of what had just happened replaying in his mind. Obi-Wan's fall, her words, that moment when his anger had crossed into something he couldn't take back. Palpatine stood across the room, hands clasped behind his back, his tone as smooth as ever. "You have done what few could, my apprentice. The Jedi are no more. The galaxy is ready for order." Anakin didn't look at him. "She needs help." "She will have it," Palpatine said, almost idly. "But you must remember, attachments can cloud judgment. You've already seen how love can turn to pain." Anakin's jaw tightened. "I'm not letting her die." A faint smile curved the Chancellor's lips. "Of course not. You have my word." Coruscant's endless cityscape spread below. As the shuttle descended into the depths of the Senate District, Palpatine led the way into the Grand Republic Medical Pavilion, his guards clearing a path. Medical droids moved in with silent precision, taking Padme into an isolation chamber. Anakin stood outside the glass, watching as the droids worked. Palpatine's voice came low beside him. "She is strong. She will live, for now. But you must focus on the greater vision. This galaxy is broken. We will rebuild it, not for the weak and treacherous Jedi, but for those who understand true power." Anakin didn't answer. His gaze stayed locked on Padme, but in the corner of his vision, Palpatine's reflection lingered like a shadow. Hours later, the droids reported she had survived the worst of her injuries. But the strain of her pregnancy meant she needed constant care. She was close to term, and any shock could endanger both her and the child. Palpatine came to Anakin with the news as if delivering a gift. "She will bear you a son. A legacy. Someone to carry your name forward." Anakin's head snapped toward him. "A son?" The Chancellor's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "Yes, he will be strong in the Force. With the right guidance, he could inherit everything we build." Anakin's thoughts shifted instantly, from the chaos of Mustafar to something far more fragile. A future. A family. It was the only thing that could still cut through the haze of rage that had followed him since the duel. But the cost of that vision was already starting to take shape. In the weeks that followed, the Senate floor became a theater for Palpatine's rise. The Chancellor stood before roaring applause, declaring that the Jedi had been traitors, that the Clone Wars were over, and that the Republic would be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire. Anakin stood at his side in dark robes, eyes scanning the chamber. The senators who remained clapped with varying degrees of conviction, some out of fear, some out of opportunism. Only a few, like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, stayed seated, their faces pale with quiet defiance. Outside the public eye, Padme was moved to a secure tower deep within the Imperial complex. Anakin visited her when he could, bringing updates about the galaxy's new order, though she didn't hide her unease. She still saw the man who had killed Obi-Wan, even when he tried to speak as the husband she remembered. One evening he arrived to find her awake but withdrawn, sitting by the window with her hands over her stomach. "It's a boy," she said softly. Anakin knelt beside her. "We'll raise him together. He'll never know fear. He'll never have to answer to anyone." Her eyes stayed on the city beyond the glass. "And what kind of world will that be?" Anakin reached for her hand, but she didn't take it. The silence between them was heavier than any words. Palpatine, meanwhile, had begun to test his apprentice's limits. He sent Anakin to oversee the last phases of the Jedi Purge, rooting out survivors, dismantling what was left of the Order's networks. With each mission, Anakin's legend grew. Whispers spread of the Emperor's new enforcer, a figure who moved with impossible speed and fought with unstoppable fury. But every time he returned to Coruscant, he went first to the tower. To Padme. to the quiet hum of the life they were waiting to meet. It was the one thing Palpatine couldn't control outright. Not yet. The day finally came when the medics announced she had gone into labor. Anakin stayed outside the chamber, pacing like a soldier before a battle. When the doors opened and the droids emerged, one carried a small, swaddled child. "A healthy boy," the chief medic said. Anakin took him into his arms, staring down at his son's face. The world outside the walls, the Empire, the war, the betrayal, seemed to fall away for that moment. But far below the medical tower, in the deepest levels of the Imperial Palace, another secret was being kept. In a hidden room, away from Anakin's knowledge, a second child had been born that day. A girl. She lay in a small cradle, guarded not by droids, but by a silent handmaiden once loyal to Padme. Palpatine entered quietly, looking down at the child with a faint, unreadable smile. "Some truths," he said to no one in particular, "are best kept buried." The handmaiden met his gaze, but said nothing. She knew the cost of speaking. Anakin would never be told. Not yet. Months passed. The galaxy adapted quickly to the Empire's grip, some out of loyalty, others out of fear. Imperial banners hung where Republic symbols had once flown. Clone patrols marched in perfect lines through city streets, their armor repainted in stark white and black. The HoloNet sang with proclamations of unity and order, all carrying the Emperor's seal. And always beside him in public stood Anakin Skywalker. No longer a Jedi Knight, not yet the black-armored figure that history would one day remember, but a man cloaked in power. His presence was both a warning and a promise. This new empire had a weapon unlike any the galaxy had seen. In private, Anakin's world was smaller. His days alternated between enforcing Palpatine's will and returning to the tower where Padme and their son lived under constant guard. There was warmth there, but it was fragile and increasingly strained. Padme rarely spoke about politics, but her silences said more than words could. She nursed their child with quiet devotion, but her gaze often lingered on the city skyline, as though searching for something she'd lost. The boy grew quickly, showing small but unmistakable signs of the Force. Toys would roll toward him without a touch. Lights would flicker when he cried. Anakin saw these moments as proof of destiny. "He's strong," he told Palpatine one evening. "Stronger than I was at his age." The Emperor's smile was thin. Then he will need guidance, soon. But Anakin's vision of that guidance didn't match his master's. He imagined his son growing to rule beside him, independent of anyone's control, even Palpatine's. And though he kept that thought buried, Palpatine sensed it all the same. Meanwhile, the Emperor had not forgotten the other child hidden away in the palace's lower levels. The girl, Leia, was kept far from Anakin's reach, raised under the careful watch of loyal attendants. Palpatine visited her in secret, speaking to her in soft, deliberate tones, shaping her mind as subtly as he shaped the Empire itself. She was too young to understand, but he saw potential. She was his contingency, a piece on the board that Anakin didn't even know existed. Tension between Master and Apprentice began to creep into their work. Missions that once saw Anakin's unquestioning obedience now came with hesitation, especially when they took him far from Coruscant. On one such assignment, he was sent to suppress an uprising on a mining world in the Mid-Rim. The resistance was small, but their tactics were unpredictable, and they had public sympathy. Anakin crushed them in less than a week, but something about the conflict stayed with him. Among the captured was a young boy, no older than his own son, clinging to a wounded father. The fear in the child's eyes was different from the fear he saw in enemies. It was the same fear he'd once felt, watching soldiers march toward a home he couldn't protect. For the first time in months, Anakin found himself questioning the nature of order as the Emperor defined it. When he returned to Coruscant, Palpatine was waiting. "You hesitated," the Emperor said, without accusation, as though it were a fact to be catalogued. "Do not mistake weakness for compassion." Anakin's voice was calm but edged. Compassion and weakness aren't the same thing. The Emperor's smile didn't change, but his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Perhaps not, but one often leads to the other. That night, Anakin went to the tower earlier than usual. Padme was asleep, their son beside her. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the rise and fall of their breathing. He wanted to believe this life could exist alongside the empire he was building, that he could be both ruler and protector, conqueror and father. But the walls between those identities were wearing thin. The balance shattered months later. A botched assassination attempt on the Emperor forced a security lockdown across the capital. In the chaos, one of Palpatine's most trusted aides, a woman who had secretly been in contact with Bail Organa, tried to reach the tower where Padme and the boy were kept. She didn't make it. Imperial guards intercepted her in the upper corridors, and her body was found hours later. When Anakin heard, he demanded to know why someone had been moving toward his family during the lockdown. Palpatine dismissed it as Senate intrigue, a failed attempt to use the child as leverage, but something in his tone rang false. That night, Anakin confronted the guards posted at the tower. Their answers were precise, too precise, as though rehearsed. He dismissed them and stayed outside the quarters himself, eyes fixed on the city lights. In the weeks that followed, he began discreetly placing his own loyal men near the tower. Not clones, but soldiers he'd trained himself, men whose loyalty was to him personally. Palpatine noticed, of course, but said nothing. For now. The years passed, and the boy grew under the shadow of the Empire. Anakin taught him the basics of the Force in secret, nothing that would draw the Emperor's suspicion but enough to kindle his power. Padme's health began to decline, the strain of living under constant surveillance wearing her down. She smiled less, spoke less, but she never stopped protecting her son. Then, on the boy's 10th birthday, the Emperor staged a grand ceremony in the convocation chamber. Anakin assumed it was another display of Imperial unity, until he saw the girl. She was small but poised, standing beside the Emperor in a gown of black and red. Her dark hair was braided, her chin lifted, her eyes fixed on the crowd without fear, and when those eyes met his, something inside him froze. There was no recognition, how could there be, but there was familiarity, a pull in the Force, subtle but undeniable. Palpatine's voice boomed over the assembly. "Citizens of the Empire, I present to you Leia, my daughter, by rights of adoption and legacy. She will be trained to serve the future of our great empire." The name struck him, Leia. When the ceremony ended, Anakin confronted the Emperor in the shadowed corridors of the spire. "You never mentioned a daughter." "There was no need," Palpatine replied smoothly. "She is a symbol, nothing more." "She's strong in the Force," Anakin said. "Many children are," the Emperor countered. "Do not chase ghosts, my friend. You have all you need." But the image of her stayed with him. That quiet, unflinching stare. That feeling in the Force. And somewhere deep down, beneath the power, beneath the rage, beneath the loyalty to an empire he had helped build, a single dangerous thought began to take root. He had not been told the whole truth. What if Anakin killed Obi-Wan on Mustafar? Maybe the Sith wouldn't rise in secret. Maybe they'd rule openly, without shame or restraint. Maybe the galaxy wouldn't fall in an instant, but in slow, burning pieces, under the hand of the man it once called a hero. Because victory isn't the end. It's the start of something darker. And Anakin Skywalker? He wasn't just a fallen Jedi. He was the Sith the galaxy would be forced to serve, whether it was ready or not. If you enjoyed this alternative timeline, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Star Wars stories. And may the Force be with you.